Chair. You good? Good, all right. Welcome everybody this evening to the March meeting of the Admin and Public Works Committee. Why don't we start with our roll call?
Chair Farmer,
Here,
Vice Chair Eden. Council Member, excuse me, Gross. Council Member Marshall,
Present.
Council Member Hopper. Council Member Albers,
Here.
Council Member Nyan. Here. Council Member Jaxi,
Here.
all right, and that brings us to the approval of minutes from our last meeting in February. If anybody would care to make a motion to approve the minutes, or if anybody has any questions or concerns, we can talk about them now.
I have a question
Yes, sir.
in the fine minutes. On. On item 5, the consideration of change order for Manchester and Taylor Road. There were 2 no votes, myself and yourself. This shows everybody voted. So that just needs to be updated.
We can do that.
Item 5 under B.
All right, anything else? Okay, would anybody care to make a motion to approve the minutes as amended? Mr. Marshall, seconded by Mr. Albers. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Anyone opposed? Any abstentions? All right, motion passes. That brings us to public participation. I don't see anybody here in the room. I know we've got a couple people watching online. If anybody would like to publicly participate, if you could just raise your hand, we'll get you moved over. Brennan, let me know if anybody does. If not, we can press forward. That brings us to our for information section of Public Works. Up first is the consideration of policy on the public dedication of private streets and alleys. I assume, Rick, that's you?
I can certainly take this, Councilmember Farmer. This item was provided to you as a follow-up, as you know, it was on our last meeting's agenda. This was in response to the motion that was made. Hopefully, we've done our best here to address the questions that were requested from us. I don't know that I need to go through it in its entirety unless you'd like me to, but I tried to provide some clarity relative to, I think there was 2 items. One was the issue of the master plan update and how that related to the ultimate takeover of the streets. And then there was also questions about Evergreen Forest and also regarding the Center Avenue improvements and the takeover of both of those streets. So I think if there's any specific questions or follow-up questions that you have, we'd certainly be glad to address them as best we can at this time.
All right, anybody have any questions?
So what was the legal interpretation of the town center plan? Does it trump our citywide policy?
So in this case, what the city attorney confirmed with that portion of the question was that is more of a guiding principle, but then you have to implement policy through additional ordinance to carry out those goals. So practically, the town center update plan is a development manual, practically what we wanted to see our town center become. It is that. It's our goals and how do we get there. And at that point, you then have to transfer it over and actually implement policy to get you to the objective. So in that case, if that trumped everything else, that would technically, for an example, if that policy, just our town center update plan trumped standard protocol, when we approved that, we would have automatically took over those streets without actually, going through the private property acquisition process. So legally, you can set those goals through the update plan, but then you have to follow it up with the legal.
Site specific.
Yeah, site specific, that's correct.
So it's a guiding principle, but it defaults to the policy.
Yes, and the thing is, the policy should be written to help adhere to that, it should help accommodate it, but obviously taking in financial considerations, then obviously the site-specific problems that might be a problem. But in this case, the city attorney did confirm that there is no contradictions between our current policy that we have now and the town center update plan, because it does allow for the mechanism for it to be taken.
All right, anything else?
I guess then the next one would be and I know Evergreen is not in town center plan, but that doesn't apply then, so it's our regular policy.
Right.
So on Evergreen, that protocol was taken place then by site-specific plan, the council approved it, and they paid so much in to bring it up to the standards.
Yeah, I did some research on it. Rick, correct me if I'm wrong, and this might also be in this memo too. I can't remember the moment. But basically, the HOA paid some money in, they paid for the curbs and stuff to get redone. The city didn't take on the sidewalks, I think, right? Because they were kind of still deemed deficient or however you want to phrase it. So it was kind of one of those, like, we took on what met the standards and we didn't take on what did not meet the standards.
And how much did they pay for the curbs? There were a lot of them.
Yeah,
So at the time, when we did the original inspection in 2017, I don't remember the footage of curbs we deemed necessary to be replaced, but it equated to about 16,150 is what they wrote us a check based on quotes to do that work. It was $16,150.
60,100.
16.
16,150, I believe.
And that paid for all the curbs?
No, it did not.
just the bad
So-
ones.
Okay. That's cheap.
So, yeah, and that's part of the burn, I guess, frankly, is once we got into looking at replacing the original curbs were asphalt.
Yeah.
And the time in 2017, we said, well, there was, a few hundred feet that were broken up and needed to be replaced. And so we got quotes just to do that. When we got into actually looking at getting them replaced, we decided to go with concrete curbs because we felt the asphalt curbs that were there just weren't gonna last that much longer. So why spend the money to replace asphalt curbs? So we went above and beyond. We replaced all the concrete curbs in over 2 years, over 2021 and 2022. And then, as you know, we were requested to overlay the road. So then we went and overlaid the road. So
The
23.
total cost of all the curbs was much greater than the 16.
yes, it was about 95,000.
And they didn't pay anything more than the 16. And then what was the cost for the overlay?
About 24,000. So all told, about 120,000.
Oh, that's surprising. It was that low in the overlay. It's quite a bit of street.
Rick, do you know how much the sidewalks would have been?
I don't know that we honestly got bids at the time to do it, so I don't remember having a number for that.
So
They were at they're still at an incline to the point where they were gonna.
the sidewalks aren't real straight either.
Yeah.
And when you fall off of those, you do fall down into those houses.
Yeah. That-
It's
yes.
pretty steep. So I guess my question would be, there being Windsor Crest's complaint or comment was that that same protocol that we're telling them they should have done wasn't being done for Evergreen subdivision. And I know a lot of different things there, but it did go from 2018 when they dedicated it, and then the work really wasn't done until 2022. Because then we made it a public street, because they used to tell everybody that was a private street, you couldn't even come up in there.
We made it public in 2018, yes. Evergreen Forest?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But the signs didn't come down until 2022.
No,
It's okay.
I can show you the ordinance, but it was December of 2018.
I know, but the signs that say private drive was still up there in 2022. But no big deal. So then my question is, that being a basis for how that was done, and then the positioning that Windsor Crest had asked, and I do know, because I was here when it was first built, everybody was so proud of having those alleys with the garages back there. That was a big deal. Nobody was doing it around here. And then as the stuff progressed and they came, obviously had come back in, then I guess what gets it a little bit more confusing is they were actually asking and identifying the damages or damaging the work in 2021 when the town center plan was approved. That's when they came in. I think she said in the thing, it was August 2021, they first applied. And then did all of the estimates on what the work was gonna take to do that or something like that. And then the ordinance 2953, which was that part of the tweaking it again? For the street after town center?
2023, yeah.
So in 2022, we brought the policy back to the Evan Public Works Committee for consideration because we felt it should incorporate the alleys in the same manner that we address other streets when we get these requests.
Okay.
So that was brought to this committee in 2022. Yes, we did table that request at that time. And subsequently, it was approved, I guess, in 2023 by the committee. Then we considered the formal request from Windsor Crest.
And at that point, how much?
I don't believe the streets deteriorated that much in that period of time, quite frankly. I think you'd be
Oh,
hard pressed to say
I'm not
that.
arguing
got
with you.
suddenly that
No,
much worse.
I'm not trying to argue with you. All I'm trying to say is somehow, some way, we gotta kind of selves in a bind here. Whether it's the timing of it or making exceptions for other people. And then coming back and saying, well, we're not gonna make that same exception for you. That's the unfortunate part that we have as a city government where we've made exceptions for gates and other things. Where other people, you can't explain what the city policy is in order to do that.
No, I think we can. We have it in writing and it's been approved by the council. We know what the policy is. Now, does that mean we followed it with the Evergreen Forest to a T? Probably not. And there was a former city administrator involved in that whole request, as you recall, at that time, and I think you might have been around. So at this point, we are trying to follow outline policy as approved by the council.
Okay, well, I just think that we have some guilt here too. That's all I'm saying. And to go in and then again, the policy thing is, I just believe that we really strongly should look at saying an alley is going to be private. Because we don't have any that haven't come back in the last 30 years to say, oh, we don't want to be private anymore, we want to be public. And they all agreed to it. Everybody said, oh, that's what we were told when we bought it. But the people who own those houses now were not the ones who bought it, didn't agree to it. So somehow, some way, I just think if we're gonna put a policy out there, it should be, and especially if it's gonna be in town center where we keep telling everybody how walkable it's gonna be. Well, if they don't have alleys and they don't have, they have a front sidewalk, but that is the access into those garage units in order to do that. So I just think there's gotta be some middle ground where, I don't know if they pay a piece of it 1 year, we fix up another piece of it another year. But somehow I believe that it's not just their fault. So my 2 cents.
All right. Anybody else? Okay, so what do you need from us tonight?
I don't need anything, quite frankly, and didn't request it in my memorandum.
Okay. So then we can try to figure out the best way to unravel this thing another time, I guess, but
Well, I guess the question would be, is we've done this now, I've only been around for
Yeah.
almost 2 years. We keep doing it, and it's not gonna get any better.
so,
And then we keep, because I can tell you Brightleaf, once theirs done, and I know they're about ready to do that. But it's all part of how are we gonna deal with 77 homes in an area that has, everybody can point, we had other city administrators, we had other council people, we had other groups. Are we going to ever do that, or are we just gonna have 77 unhappy people?
well, maybe the question is, and I don't know if this is a possibility, but sort of similar to the. I guess the question is, are these alleys more similar to the curbs? Like if we use Evergreen as the example, are they more similar to the curb problem or the sidewalk problem? I don't know the answer to that.
Well, I think the issue is the 20 years that elapsed with Windsor Crest, right? I mean, time takes its toll. We don't have that issue across the street, obviously. I don't expect there's gonna be any deficiencies. If they wait 20 years, there will be probably.
Yeah.
So I think they need to get their application in as soon as possible, and we'll address it as soon as we can. We did this with Main Street Crossing again and Manners at the Meadows. I think we got those through in a fairly timely manner, so we can respond to it if they can make the request.
So the hangup though with this
I have
specific
not seen the
one,
request.
But I mean, the hangup that we're kind of talking through here specifically is because Windsor Crest was an older subdivision, I guess, at this point, and didn't have, maybe there wasn't a mechanism to accept those things at that time.
It wasn't part of town center either.
Right. So, I mean, I'm just wondering if, you know, try to keep this thing possible. In the last meeting, we voted to basically uphold the policy as written based on our findings here. So from a legal standpoint, our policy is
As written.
clear and as written.
Yeah.
On this specific issue, I get what you're saying on this thing. I just think we want to make sure that we're not exacerbating another problem by doing this.
So what's our plan with Center Avenue? That's probably more similar,
Right.
because we've gone in and at this point, the homeowners haven't paid anything, correct?
The developer is paid, yes. So
Well, and isn't that though, I mean, people like, that is kind of like a through street as compared to an alley around the back. I mean, having driven over in Windsor Crest, I don't know that I would call them an alley. I mean,
Yeah.
it seems like a road around the back of the house, but whatever makes people happy, I suppose.
I think we've defined it as alleys. I mean, that's how they were all sold, with alleys with rear entry. They all had 2-car garages with rear
Right.
entry in it. So I think that's definitely, yeah. I'm just kind of saying that if we make alley and street synonymous for their consideration or whatever, and we say to them, okay, you have to pay to bring it up to code now, and it's now 20 years later, you guys have to do that. And if that's our positioning, I get it. That's not the positioning we took with Evergreen.
Right.
And then what are we gonna do? How will we answer that with
Right, Lisa.
Center?
Yeah. Well, I mean, maybe, I was over there, I think a couple days ago. It looks to me like they've patched some of that stuff. So I mean, is this a situation, Rick, where we can sort of like with the curbs, like, does the entirety of that place need to be like dug up and redone? Or is this a matter of like fixing like really broken parts and then we're gonna go cover it up anyways? How does that work?
Well, for Center Avenue, we did go through this year and we overlaid the road.
Okay.
Built it and overlaid it to bring it up to an acceptable condition. And to hold it, at least for the time being. So ultimately, if we want to bring it up to the full town center standard, we could do that. And the developer's been putting money.
I mean more
towards that.
more of the Windsor Crest people, like, since that, like, you know, the entire alley isn't crumbling into gravel. I mean, there are sections that are pretty bad. So is this a situation where, you know, maybe what you're saying Ed, is like, can we find a happy medium that solves, you know, in a similar way, these things? And then, you know, I mean, I think we just need to have a significantly more clear policy on, like, we just don't, like, this has been done in the past and it just doesn't apply anymore. You know, I think even treating stuff as a case by case basis is kind of,
Not a good way.
it's not great.
And I'm not disagreeing. I just think that part of it is we got this policy.
Yeah.
Some good things about it, but then we have this other stuff that's kind of slipping through the cracks. Or how we're gonna deal with it. I don't think it's on things that haven't been developed yet.
Right.
It's when we go back to try to correct something, I think we step in it and make it a little bit more. So I don't know if that 137,000 is what they were saying over there. And they said at one point they thought it was 70,000.
That was a different, the 170, the 137,000 was the city's quote to do all the items that were outlined in the inspection report. The idea, at least, I believe it was for the overlay and maybe some additional, I don't know exactly, the 70,000 was what their quote stated. We don't know if that
But I
covered
also
the-
think they didn't have either amount of money anyways. I don't know. I mean,
Well, it sounded like at one point they knew they were gonna have to pay. I thought they had said they were gonna pay close to 70,000.
I think that they thought that, but I mean, I don't know that they, like, what they said last week or last month was they have a hard time getting people to just pay the HOA dues.
Exactly. Well, and maybe the positioning then should be is, okay, here's what the council's decided to do. If you guys wanna come up with the money, then we'll take the rest of that. If you don't wanna come up with it, then nothing's gonna happen.
Yeah.
But it's
Because
a
I
bit
think
to a
what we
point
said
that won't
last
be
week, right,
safe.
or last month.
Yeah, I mean, that,
I mean, it's more or less what we said last month.
and
Yeah,
it,
but I don't think we firmly go back and say, here's what, we've not gone to the council to say, this is what we're going to agree. We just kind of let them come to every meeting and
Okay.
come up and ask those kind of questions.
Well, then, do we wanna have, does it make sense? I don't know if does it make sense to put that as a motion to move to the full council, so we just get this thing locked up. I don't know if I don't know if we can do that right now. Is that separate from this?
Yeah, it is. I would say that for us, we would need to close the matter on the review of the policy, then we can have a second motion to bring
Okay.
this specific instance forward.
Are there any parts of the wording of the policy that we want to change though? That's the thing I was wondering. If it's vague to all of us, if we've read it several times, and we're not, we have to go to the attorney to find out if the overlap is included or not. Do we need to put a couple more sentences in there or something out of there to figure out if it's clearer than what we're all
So,
reading?
okay, so then maybe what we do is we will close out this matter, because this matter is closed. Then we can take that up and maybe next month bring, if you have time, if that's enough time, we'll just assess the policy as a whole as compared to like this specific case that we're talking about. And just figure out if we need any tweaks. Does that make sense? And if then that works, then we can move it to the next meeting and then we're done. I mean, the next council meeting.
Okay, so we just need to meet on it and either tick everybody off or agree that we're not gonna do exceptions in the future.
Yeah, I don't think we should be doing exceptions. I mean, we have policies for a reason, so, I mean, I don't know. I think it's bad, I think it's bad governance to have people be able to get exceptions because they, for whatever reason, it's just never great. So. I mean, we can, let's close out this and then we'll make that statement. Does
That's
that
fine.
make sense? Okay, so we don't need a motion to close this, or do you want?
No, in
Okay.
this case, it's,
So.
Yeah.
In this case, we'll accept the information. Thank you, Mr. Brown. And then how do you want to phrase your proposal on the policy moving forward? To ensure we're not doubling back and doing all this stuff.
Oh, I guess the question would be is to be able to read it and understand that the town center portion of it is inclusive in it, even if just a sentence says, this includes town center or something, so that we're not trying to jump
Or we
around.
say the town center update plan does not supersede this citywide policy.
I think that's,
That makes sense? Okay. If that's all we need, then we can probably just move that to the council meeting. Right? Unless anybody has any other
Everybody else
thoughts.
think it makes sense?
Yeah,
I mean, that makes sense to me.
I'm okay with it.
and then it's in there and 2 years from now, we're not going, well, does that supersede or does that we have to find out all over again?
Well, because we're updating that plan again.
Yeah,
anyways.
well, yeah.
Okay, that makes sense to me. Do you need a motion to move it to the council or are you good? Okay. Mr. Marshall, you care to make
Happy
the
to make
motion?
that motion.
All right,
so to clarify, just before we, a motion, to clarify the language included in our public dedication policy, that the town center update plan does not supersede that policy. Correct.
I'm wondering, do we want to do it in just that policy or like for every policy the city has?
I think it might be different by different policies.
Okay.
Depending on, that'd just be my guess because it comes to.
That might be a John question.
Yeah.
So we can go with this.
Yeah, I don't, the only other thing I knew is then you have to go back to the town center policy, put a clause in there that it does not.
That it doesn't supersede.
Yeah, so I mean, you might be able to do it that way easier.
Okay, so maybe then we talk to the attorney and figure out which is the best way to do that. Does that make sense? Okay. Anybody care to second that? Seconded by Ms. Nyan.
This is
all
really
yours.
easy.
Rob, you good on what we're talking about?
Yeah, Rob.
Okay.
Jump in sometime.
Amy, you good?
Mhm.
All right, all those in favor, please say aye.
I,
Anyone opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, moving on. I'm excited to pass on from that, for sure. All right, up next. We've got Centaur Road Bridge Repair. Mr. Brown?
Council members, Chair Farmer, this next item is a recent bid that we received for repairs to the Centaur Bridge, which is immediately north of Off Horse Creek Road. An inspection of that bridge identified deficiencies that required our attention and repairs. So Brendan worked with a consultant to put together a bid package to address the repairs that were needed. We did open bids earlier, and we had several bidders and RB Wagner was the lowest. I did provide you the tabulation of bids. So we had three bidders, I believe. Three bidders. So RB Wagner was the lowest of the three. We did budget $150,000 for this item of work for this year. So we are under our budgeted amount in this case, which is good. So we are recommending moving forward with a agreement with RB Wagner to complete the project. Their bid amount was $121,684.80. We are asking for a little additional money for contingency so that the overall contract amount would not exceed $140,000. So that is the request tonight. If there's any questions, I'd be glad to do my best to address them.
All right, any questions? I have just one. Did we already fix this bridge one time?
No, that's not
The
the
other
same
one?
structure. That's further down the road. You're probably thinking about.
So-
This was rehabbed. I mean, we did fix it in 2011. Been a while.
So, but this is like a super old bridge, right?
It was built in 1967. And so in 2011, we redecked it. Essentially, we took the deck off of the bridge and repoured it with the bridge.
So based on our, whatever we're doing here, how long do we expect this to last? I guess my question is, do we want to keep repairing whether it's this bridge or other bridges, or is there a point where we just need to put a new bridge in?
Well, that's a fair question to ask. I mean, the new bridge,
Obviously, it's.
well, I mean, the answer to that question is we go based on the inspection reports that we receive. And clearly, when the repairs start getting to be identified or to the point where it would make sense to build a new bridge, we would consider it. Given the price, I mean, a new bridge can run you easily $1 million. I would think that this structure would be good to go for, I don't know, 8 to 10 years. With these expenditures.
And then the plan would be in 8 to 10 years, we just have the, whatever, like if we're doing a 10% repair, that makes sense to me as compared to just throwing a new bridge out there.
I think that's the correct approach, yes, rather than trying to budget for a new bridge. And quite frankly, I don't know that we have the time to do that either.
Yeah.
Because of the corrections are necessary to be addressed before we get the next inspection from MoDOT, because we don't want them to come back and tell us to close the bridge, so.
And it's not like there's any big traffic increase going out there, right? I mean, it's not like they're building 2 new subdivisions or concrete trucks or.
Well, honestly, I mean, I had thought of this. I mean, I don't know that I'm recommending it, but that bridge, it on one hand provides a nice backup to Wild Horse Creek Road, but it is redundant. You know, it's nice to have that option because we do have instances where it has been handy to have that allowance, you know, when traffic can't use the South Hudson Road coming down the hill perhaps, you know, and that's gonna happen shortly with our construction.
Closed a lot.
But the reality is, we could probably remove that bridge and survive, you know, the traffic volume on Centaur isn't that great. I don't know how the locals would feel about that, quite frankly, but.
Okay. All right. Anybody have any other questions or care to make a motion to proceed?
Proceed.
All right. Science makes the motion to proceed. Anybody have a second? Seconded by Mr. Marshall. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, asphalt resurfacing. You're all about it.
Member Chair Farmer, this next item is our annual asphalt resurfacing project. We do have $650,000 budgeted for this year for resurfacing, and we have put together a bid. And we opened bids on January 24th for a project that would overlay Strecker Road in its entirety. And a section of Manchester Road, or what people think of as Old Manchester, from Route 109 down to the stop at Atherton Road, the all-way stop. Where the porch is. And we'd like to do that this summer with the improvement project. We did get 2 bids and we're proposing to do a Nova Chip thin lift asphalt overlay, which is what we've been doing as of late. It's allows your money to go a lot further. It's a very tough and durable asphalt overlay. It works very well. We've been very pleased with it. So as with past years, we got 2 bidders. The difference this year is that Pace Construction was the low bidder, and MB West had been the low bidder for many years. And Pace has been coming in and has been very competitive on their bidding this year. And they were the low bidder. They incidentally are going to be doing the overlay work on our Manchester Taylor project. And then they won the MoDOT bids for Route 109 and BA resurfacing, which is going to start soon. And then, as we'll talk about shortly, they also got the low bid on the Route 100 projects. So tonight, with this request, we are asking or recommending moving forward with an agreement with Pace Construction to complete the project this summer, during the summer months, and the total cost to the city would not exceed $510,000 if it's approved. And with that, I'll address any questions that you may have.
Yes, sir.
On the Old Manchester resurfacing, Rick, is that just rotated? Like saying from the firehouse to the stop sign basically on this leg? And is there a rotation of doing this? Just from my personal knowledge, and then you do another portion of Old Manchester next year or down the road? Is that how it's?
More or less, yes. I mean, that's kind of the way it works. This was last done in 2013.
Okay.
So it's probably the older stretch of Manchester, Old Manchester, that has not yet been resurfaced more recently.
Okay.
We did the section east. Well, of course, we did the streetscape west of Taylor Road, and that was done in 2020. And then east of there, we had a resurfacing project that was done in about 2018, I think. Yep.
Thanks.
Mr. Marshall.
So under the per cost unit for NB West from milling, is that a mistake with 16.82 versus 5.75 with Pace? It just doesn't look right, that's all I'm saying.
I want to say when we talked about this, it's because West Contracting has a subcontractor. Yeah, that's correct. And Pace does not, and that may be their competitive advantage right now. If they are able to do the milling at a much reduced cost.
Just leave them at
I believe it.
How they're getting all these bids, I imagine.
my piece of equipment.
Yeah, right. Is this gonna do anything to like disrupt those planting beds and stuff along Stricker that we already kind of have trouble keeping things alive in anyways?
No, sir, it won't impact that. We won't be removing those islands or doing anything. We are gonna be trying to go through and replace any curbs that are damaged that need to be replaced in advance. We also may be doing a little bit of work to replace curb ramps in that area as well, if they're deficient. So, but no, we'll certainly retain those islands.
All right. Okay, nobody has anything else? A motion to proceed made by Mr. Albers. Anybody here to second? Seconded by Tracy. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Any abstentions? All right. Last but not least, status of MoDOT cost share projects.
Council members, this next item pertains to the Route 100 improvements that I just referenced. We've been working for several years on two projects that are cost share improvement projects with MoDOT. MoDOT packaged those two with their own resurfacing project on Route 100. So essentially, there's three projects that are going to hopefully get constructed this year, starting later this springtime. On February 21st, MoDOT did open bids for all three projects. The overall bid, the apparent low bidder was Pace Construction for a bid of about $14.3 million. That's all three projects combined. Unfortunately, the J-turn project and the left turn project, that are the two cost share projects that we have agreements with MoDOT in place. They came in above our original cost estimates for construction of those improvement projects. So as you may recall, we entered into these cost share agreements originally, I believe in 2021, and the cost estimates were done in 2020. The agreements were all based upon sharing the cost, basically 50-50 with MoDOT, based on the 2020 cost estimates. So MoDOT committed to put up half of the cost, and we were going to pick up the remaining 50%. And unfortunately, the agreement basically said, city, if you go over on these costs, you get stuck with the tab. And that's the agreement that we signed. And that's what we committed to. Now, MoDOT's resurfacing project, the total overlay from West Glen Farms out beyond the county line, that's all on MoDOT. That's not our cost, and we're not involved in that. That's totally separate. So of the 14.3 million, our two projects are about don't quote me on it, 6.4 million thereabouts, including construction engineering. Just to give you a sense of how our two projects compare to the overall 14.3 million number. So, with our cost share projects, it's clear that we are likely going to need to pay MoDOT additional funds to cover these high bids. And I think I referenced the fact that the original cost estimates were from 2020. Clearly they were dated. We did have at least 1 year allowance for extra inflation. If you recall, and some of you may remember this, we supplemented these original agreements that we did in 2021 to allow MoDOT to take over the construction administration. So instead of us bidding it ourselves and building it with a contractor that we selected, they're bidding it and they're administrating the construction of the project with their overlay project, which makes it easier, in my opinion, for everybody. When we supplemented the agreements, we pushed the completion or the starting date out a couple years to allow MoDOT time to program their funds for their overlay project. So then that added a couple years delay. Effectively, there was probably those 2 years we didn't account for inflation. That combined with the fact we got two bidders is why you're seeing this increase, in my opinion. Ideally, we'd have had 4 or more bidders. We have 2 bidders on the project. Base was the low bidder at 14.3 million. So in a typical cost share project, MoDOT has a clause that says cities, at this point, after the bids come in, we compare the actual bid to the construction cost estimate, essentially, and if it's over, cities, you write a check for us for the difference, or you can back out. That was not included in our agreements. For whatever reason, that was not in the agreements. However, the MoDOT project manager that we've been talking to has basically said that they want us to treat it like it was. They're asking us to make up the difference. So my pushing back has been to remind them it's not in the agreement. I think everyone agrees that it's not a requirement of the agreement that we have in place. However, MoDOT does have a clause in each one of those 2 agreements that says they can cancel the agreement at any time. So ultimately, they do have some power to cancel if they don't feel, really for no reason whatsoever, they could cancel both of these agreements and not move forward with either project. That's what they desire to do. So we're kind of in a difficult situation, and I'm looking to get some feedback from the committee with regard to next steps. They are essentially asking us to make up the difference in cost from the original cost estimate for construction versus the actual bid. And based on my calculations, it could be on the order of $540,000. That we'd be on the hook to write them a check. I think if we did that, we'd very likely get a refund when the total costs at the end of the project are added up. Because I think they're being overly conservative. But I can't guarantee that either. I think right now, based on the cost where they're at, we should be looking at potentially about $280,000 of additional costs. So this is well above where I think we'll end up. So we could offer to pay a lesser amount potentially and see if they will agree to that. We could agree to not write a check for any monies and see what happens, see what the reaction is. Or we could just go out and comply with their request. So I know Thomas and I have discussed this already ad nauseum, quite frankly. Thomas, you want to add any more to the?
Yeah, overall, I mean,
concern?
it's not in the agreement, but there is a clause in the agreement that says they can cancel the project. And the one issue that I see with that is they have the resurfacing tied in with the 2 projects we're looking at, the left turn lanes and the J turns project. So my worry is that we balk on this, which contractually we're not obligated to make the payment right now, but it would still be owed at some time. So it would be probably done at a later date after they take into account the federal funding, some additional credits from the engineering. So there is some risk here if we don't want to, if we want to kind of play our cards and say, hey, we don't want to make the payment right now, because the other concern that Department Administration has is when this project comes to fruition and is ended, usually what's been done is that final payment, when they tally up the costs, even if it is over, hope is you get some back, but if it is over, typically they want their money, so that helps us get a little bit quicker responses when we're asking for the auditing information. Hey, we, this invoice, that invoice whatsoever. With our Director of Public Works estimating that this is actually gonna exceed, we're probably gonna get money back on this now. It makes it so they're gonna be pretty much writing us a check back. So they might not have that same urgency. So that's the biggest concern from the department. That said, this is a pretty substantial issue. It's over what was, it's over what was estimated, it's over what was budgeted. So in this case, we would have to cut back elsewhere to be able to accommodate this. That being said, I mean, when you look at the full cost of the project, it was around 13% on each project over what was anticipated. So tonight, department's looking for feedback. We'll take it to the to MoDOT to give them how this meeting went, but from the meeting we had recently, it was almost like, hey, we'll just postpone the project until you guys can come up with the funds.
So they could postpone award of the project. Their commission will be meeting. I remember it's later this week. I think it's later this week. So at that meeting, they will have to make a decision if they're going to postpone the award on account of this issue or move forward. So it's possible they may just move forward. I'd like to think that would happen, but I don't really have a sense what the read is here. But it certainly is possible, or they could withhold the award and just postpone it for a month and let there become more clarity on this issue potentially. I would be a little surprised if they would just offhand cancel our two projects. I would be pretty shocked, frankly, but I don't know if I have a great read either with MoDOT at this point in time.
Okay. Anybody got anything?
So you're saying if we push them too far, they may cancel not do their portion of the resurfacing? Like if we don't agree to pay this and, lay our hand or whatever, that you're afraid not only would they possibly stop those two projects, but they possibly would not do the resurfacing either.
The concern is, and I'll let Rick, our Director of Public Works, explain a little bit further, but they bid this out as one project, and there's three components. When you look at the design and the engineering behind it, there's the resurfacing, which is on them. There's the left turn lanes, which is ours, and then there's the J-turns portion of it. So there's three different components, but they went out with one bid to get, I assume, to probably get the best price to package it all together, because the resurfacing work, I would assume, would probably be the most attractive. But that said, if they would have to pretty much go back and rebid it out if they canceled our two projects and then went back with just the resurfacing. So that's the risk. I mean, we don't know for sure, and it would be tough to swallow if they canceled it, but in that case, I mean, they do have a provision that says they can cancel any of these projects at any time, even if we do make the payment. That's something MoDOT has in all their agreements. So kind of learning a lesson and working with MoDOT in the first place.
One thing that I didn't put in the memo, but Thomas and I were talking this afternoon, and I don't know if it's a possibility, but if you recall, the Manchester Taylor project, we were able to get a one-time increase. And since we did get the city got federal funding for the J-turn project for essentially 80% of our half originally, which is going to help. That's why I don't think our commitment is as great as what they're saying, but we could go, and I think we should, and I don't think that I need a motion to do this, and we will look into this. If at all were possible to do that, we should do it and see if we could get more federal funds, because that will help MoDOT, that'll help us. So that's one thing we need to do, is check on that to see if there's a chance we can still do that.
That would only impact the J-turns portion of it.
It would only impact the J-turns, but it certainly, anything would help, obviously. So we'll check on that and we can report back on
Marshall.
What makes you think that this would be the first project that came in under estimate?
And that's what, like, we're never getting any money back.
No, I mean, obviously you feel pretty confident that maybe that there's money back, but when was the last time we had one where we got money back?
We've gotten money back before.
In
It's
the last
probably
couple of
the,
years?
I think we got money back on the original improvements to Route 109 north of 100 that was done like in 2015. But yeah, so it can happen. And the reason I think it would happen here is because I think the way you figure the cost, we're splitting the cost 50-50, and then we pay the balance of increases above and beyond, but they're not factoring in the federal funds. And they're assuming that the 12% for preliminary engineering is accurate, which obviously nobody knows right now. That very well could be conservative. It wouldn't surprise me if it's conservative, frankly. And so that could come in, say, at 10% or 9% or whatever that number is, instead of 12%. In that case, there would be some monies available potentially that we would get back. Because again, there would be an overall counting of the costs when the construction is complete. So any change orders and any of the construction engineering fees for MoDOT staff would be added onto the bill. And that's what would be used to come up with the final cost. Plus our cost for engineering that we've already expended.
So where would we? Let's assume that we don't get the money back. And the whole project is there. What will we take the money out of for next year?
You have to start canceling projects, quite frankly. It gets a little bleak. I mean, that's an expenditure that was much over what we anticipated.
It's big.
Big.
But I mean, I'm looking in here that Route 109 is Suzanne Ridge, On Grover, Fullerton Meadows, those are in 2028. And that's only $450,000. So you're looking for how much of a possibility now? And I know it could even go higher than what you're thinking, right?
Well, the number I was proposing was about 540,000.
So in 2026, we have Etherington Road and Easton Center. 850 on Easton Center and 1.5 on that other Etherington, and Valley Road at 975. Is that 975? Actually, it's gonna be in 25, right?
And which one?
Valley Roads
this year.
About $1
That's,
million.
yeah, that's, should be coming up this year.
So it's just in the 5-year plan, I guess, what I was looking at. It seemed, if you did, I mean, I think that's a big project and be kind of silly not to do different pieces, but that just means something else isn't gonna happen the following year. If it does come in that way, you just gotta pull something else out. And then what's not part of funding, so if Valley Road is any federal funding or state funding or anything like that, you don't wanna give that up, but I don't have an answer for you, I'm just.
Yeah, we are on the hook for the increases. The question is how much, and do you want to pay them a conservative figure now or pay the actual amount later? And I don't know what MoDOT's response is going to be if we don't pay the amount now. But legally, we don't believe we have to make it. They're just saying, they're treating this like every other cost share project, I guess, that must have had this agreement clause in it. Reason the ones that we worked up never had it in there. So,
Usually there would be that final accounting at the end of it, and it would actually give you real cost. This is kind of a spitball and conservative. They're trying to be conservative because they want to cover as much as they can. They would rather return money to us than have to cover us at any point.
The whole J-turn process went on a few years here, right? So it'd be rough to throw that back to the wolves, you know?
I know a few people who'd be pretty happy. If we
No,
did something.
I could give you about 40 to just.
Yeah,
be-
there's a lot of people that would be real happy. we-
No, well,
Yeah.
maybe that wasn't the right way to say it, but
I-
well, more that, oh, these people would find out, oh, now we're gonna spend even more money on the project that we don't want.
I mean, I would say this is a pretty big chunk of money. And so I think we need to do everything we can to understand, you know, from our standpoint, if we were seemingly to MoDOT's benefit in a way, and a little bit ours, like we gave up control of a project which pushed it down the road, which has resulted in a pretty big increase. I mean, that section of that road needs to get rebuilt. It's in really bad shape from West Glen Farms all the way down. It's terrible. So, I mean, part of me is almost willing to gamble that the state is not going to not do that road for 600 grand. I think that the news would eat them alive.
I would think it would be foolhardy for them not to do it. I just think we got federal funds that are almost $1 million. They got the city on the hook for.
We've already made the payments authorized. I mean, we're already we're over $1 million direct payments to them for this to go out to bid. And this, typically what would happen is they would do the project and hopefully it comes under. There was expenses that were over. They would come back to us and say, hey, it went over, here's how much. They would give us updates in the meantime, but they wouldn't actually anticipate payment. So in that case, there's also usually an option to exit out of the agreement for cities during that period. Like, oh, it came in over, just like we would
Or not even
for
like
one of our
a
projects.
small amount over.
Yeah, it's,
I mean, what percentage over is this, like 20%?
well, what was anticipated over the total cost, it was about 12.22% on the J turns and about 14.62% on the left turn lanes.
It's paid.
Get more bad publicity at this point.
All right, well, I guess my question would be, unless somebody has a different opinion on how to proceed. I mean, I'm not a fan of just cutting them a check. That doesn't seem like the best solution to me.
So if we were to write a check, we would enable it through another supplemental agreement with MoDOT. So there would be an agreement drafted that would ultimately could come back to you all, probably would come back to you all first and then go to council.
And as part of that agreement, can we put in controls that like, they're not gonna come back and be like, just kidding, it's even more expensive than we thought it was.
Well,
going to
that's,
be."
you know, if they're, that's kind of what was communicated to them is that if you're gonna open up this box, this supplemental box where you're gonna now have us amend the agreement, because you guys they're technically breaching and requesting this at this time. And honestly, it's everything that our attorney can get away with, that we can get away with them. Quite frankly, it's a renegotiation of the agreement at that point.
All right,
They
Except we
probably
wanna
don't
look
want,
into
they
more
probably don't
federal
want to lose
funding,
this
right? So-
project either.
Well, and that's it, especially since, I mean, we're already in, we're financially in on this right now. They have monies to proceed, at least a portion of it. They've got federal funding tied to it. There would be a lot of pressure from the residents. 100's in really tough shape. That's something that the city, but also our residents have reported constantly on their website. I think no matter what, they at least owe that 100 project to resurface it, but problem is they bid it all together. And that's what freaks me out a little bit, freaks the department out, is that they could just kind of sit on their hands if we kind of be a hindrance, but it's a big chunk of change and they were anticipating a quick turnaround. Just say, you know, we just need this payment to move forward.
we just need this extra.
Yep.
500 grand.
No big deal.
There's part of our problem.
That builds a lot of islands along high roads nobody wants.
That's what I'm saying. It's-
Okay, well. How would we like to proceed, everybody?
Well, did Rick say that he wants to go back if there's any other thing before we would decide?
That could be part, so in this case, the department was looking for just general direction. I mean, we can go back to MoDOT with whatever committee's thinking.
I think we need to, at the very least, we need to go back like we did on this other thing and go, there needs to be an inflationary adjustment. This is crazy. And you've already done it once before, and I'm sure they've done it in other places. And as we found on a lot of our cost sharing agreements, MoDOT would love for us to pay for all kinds of their stuff. It doesn't mean that we have to do it. It's their road. It just happens to cut through the middle of our city.
If we had to take one of the two out, which would we take out?
J-turns. Those left turn lanes are,
I mean, from a safety standpoint, that seemed to be what they were really pushing.
Yeah, and the thing is, the federal funding comes in from J-turn, so technically the more expensive when it hits the city's pocket, it's actually the left turn lanes, but those left turn lanes are really,
Left turn lanes.
those are in really bad shape.
Everybody was in favor of the left turn lanes. Not so much on the J turns.
Listen, that's another option. Take them out. Safety wise.
Honestly, that is an option. I mean, we could say proceed with one, or propose that, proceed with just the left turn lanes, I suppose.
Three
But
projects.
we'd still potentially have money, yeah.
That could affect, well, the problem is because the contractor, here's the biggest issue I see with it, is that the contractor bid on the whole thing, and they broke it out in their bid package, but they're basing that off of doing X amount of work.
Yeah.
You do X minus one, then all of a sudden they're like, well, that makes my numbers go up a little bit here and here. That being said, I mean, if we need to, it's something that can definitely be considered, and I would assume could be done in a supplemental anyways, that would be part of the supplemental agreement. If that was
I
truly a
mean,
desire
the
of the
J
council.
turns. Well, we asked for some advice on what to do. The J turns were somewhat forced upon us, if I remember correctly.
Well, from the perspective, the original study that was done by MoDOT, yes.
Right. So it was
That
like,
recommended.
No roundabouts.
they
no
didn't wanna
lights.
have anything to do with the roundabouts and all that. They wanted to put in the rural J turns that have been used in other parts of the state, but not here, and sure, it'll be great. So I would be okay going, hey, we can take this, here's what we can afford. It's this amount of money. And we can take these J turns out, or you guys can make these adjustments, or all of the above. But this is the amount of money that we can make this work with. Cause I mean, $540,000 is a lot of projects.
Unless you have someplace you think you're gonna pull the money out of the next year. I mean, that's the only other option.
Well-
I mean, I think if you ask for more money, and there isn't any, then do we take the J turns out? And then, or do you have some other projects that we have scheduled in the future that aren't as important as the busiest highway we have in the city?
I mean, we're sort of turning our back on public safety then too.
Yeah, that's exactly the problem.
And there's a lot of, the problem is that intersection at Pond, it's dangerous.
It's very dangerous.
Right.
It's very dangerous. So that's, I think, as Mr. Marshall's saying, there's some other projects we could probably trim the fat, make sure that this route is done. But I think that exploring east-west gateways, inflationary adjustment, on at least the J-turn portion of it could help. And then, I mean, in any kind of supplemental that we had planned to do, it could be at a X amount cost. And problem is, if we want to determine, hey, we're gonna pay this amount, but then be done, then we would potentially, are we gonna get money back? I mean, it could be based off they're being pretty conservative, it seems.
We've already cut it down to just 2 J turns. And unfortunately, Pond Road is a pain, but Highway T is where the fatalities have happened. So I mean, that's where you just gotta,
Higher speeds are at Highway T, right?
I mean, they're spending a lot of money replacing signs at Pond Road. Every day I drive by there, there's a new one knocked down.
Yeah.
is that a workable approach to try that? Or, I mean, you could say, hey, if we could take this stuff out of the next year budget, at least then we could make a decision and not lose the whole project.
The department could come back with a list of projects for next year that would be
Push back.
Yeah, I mean,
list.
it's the choice. I mean, I don't know about, when does this decision have to get made by?
They're wanting the money right now, but the thing is, we told them that from my perspective, I could not authorize 500.
Yeah, right. So maybe the question is, do we want to get this list for our next meeting, or do we want to get this list for the next council meeting so that we can have the wider conversation? I think we can do that, right?
Yeah, I think, I mean,
By Monday?
we wouldn't have the supplemental and things like that if we were, the finalized version of it wouldn't be ready.
Right.
But we probably wouldn't be able to hear back from.
We would have
East West
I mean, I guess what I'm saying is if, to me, worst case scenario, we need to cut a check for 540 grand. You guys come to us and say, these are the 2 or 3 projects that are not happening.
Mhm.
If you do that, this is what is not happening.
Yep.
That allows the council to go yes or no, and then we can finagle
Specifics.
however you guys need to go back and figure that out. But I think,
I mean, if you look at exactly what the projects are, I mean, I was never a fan of the Pond Grover thing to Fullerton anyway. I mean, to me, that's $150,000.
is that the flowers?
Medians and in the center. But I mean, I'd be more than happy to explain to them that we can't do that.
Right.
But I'm just saying, that's just one. I mean. you
And I
gotta-
appreciate you giving up $150,000
I wouldn't
to
have been in
make
it
our
first.
city safer. That's a good
If it'd
move.
been up to me, there wouldn't be a park there either,
There we
but
go.
it's not.
And,
Right.
and we're also looking for go and get additional help on this?
Yes, but I don't know that we can get that help by
Okay,
Monday, but we can understand, hey,
okay,
if we get no more help and this is the number, then these are the projects that.
Okay.
And then if it doesn't come in that we have to spend that, then we can go back to the plan we have. I just think we should be prepared to
okay,
say,
that's a good idea.
we have to cut, because we do think that's a big project. So, and I think the people are concerned about, I'll just use the positive thing. 100's a lot more.
It's
Safety
super
issue.
dangerous. Yep,
Putting a median strip in there, so.
I agree.
Well, we can, I mean, in that case, we won't have the specifics with the East-West Gateway, I believe. I mean, we're gonna reach out to them, but we wouldn't have the supplemental, but it could be something under a work session just to, I mean, no matter what, it should be for information. It's department.
Yeah, I think we put in for information. If anybody has an issue or other suggestions, they can bring it up, but then when we get the supplemental stuff, then we can bring it back in here. That'll be faster. And I would suggest, I mean, obviously they want the check yesterday anyways, but there is also an election coming up. So if they don't want us to have to explain this to a whole bunch of new people, they better come up with an answer real quick.
Yep, I think the goal would be to try to get something ironed out for your next admin public works meeting. Guess that would still be able to be approved by the current council.
In that case, could we get a motion to proceed with just a general update informational report to the council, but still keeping the matter
Mhm.
at this committee?
Yeah.
And then at the next meeting, having recommendations for removals, whether or not East-West Gateway can assist. And then also if, the draft supplemental as well, that would
So moved.
proceed.
All right, made by Mr. Marshall, seconded by Ms. Ryan. Rob, you good? Okay, Amy, you got what we're going for here?
Amy, would you mind if I repeat it,
Nope.
Chair? Amy, it's to submit an informational report to city council. You can just put in parentheses, March 10, 2025. Then the other portion is threefold. It is make recommendation on capital projects to be removed to make up for deficit. Reach out to East-West Gateway for inflationary adjustment. And come back to Administration Public Works Committee in April with draft supplemental with agreeable terms.
And we need to make sure we have a quorum in
Yeah.
April. With a couple conflicts that you discussed earlier.
That's fair.
All right, everybody good? Amy, you're good? Okay. All those in favor of our four informational item moving up to the council, please say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Any abstentions? All right, we'll hear about this in part, I guess, here in a couple days. Okay. Up next, deer management.
Thank you, Chair. Wanted to give a quick summary. Right now, we're still waiting on the final report from White Buffalo, which should be ready to go for the council meeting on Monday, March 10th. That said, wanted to give a quick update on the results of the program, a little overview. Ryan Rhodes, the project manager with White Buffalo, also plans to attend the city council meeting on Monday virtually. So any questions, he'll give a quick overview of the operations, what he's found. But overall, operations went good. They're pretty well handled. We had very few resident call-ins that were complaining. Actually, the department got 0 of those. In this case, 361 deer were culled over 29-day operations. Averaged about 12.44 deer per night. Of those, about 215 were female, 146 male. Important number there is the 322 antlerless. So that means either shedding, but mostly adult deer, a lot of fawns, younger deer that are they're gonna contribute to the problem. That's the ones that the hunters would not remove. So great to see that they were able to exceed the target number in a shorter amount of time, but that also goes to also show that there's a serious deer population issue up there. Right now, we're currently looking to do deer sampling surveys. We have the Wildwood Precinct Police going out with our partner, Brad Wendling, retired Sergeant Brad Wendling, to first and foremost, we're looking at Southeast One as the most logical next step. It's actually covering, we're in Southeast One right now. We'll have more info on that at a follow-up meeting, but we're looking to do Southeast One to get new data on Southeast One, then also go back to Northeast Two to see that summary data. And if we can get in before the spring bloom, we would also look to do Northeast One again, since there was a lot of culling that we did cleanup efforts, if you will, in the Northeast One area. Once we have that data, we'll have a better sense of where to go with it. Southeast One is looking promising with potential revisiting of Northeast Two. Specifically, there are a couple HOAs that ended up denying access to the common ground areas. We have a list of properties in those subdivisions. Specifically, it's Wild Horse, Garden Valley, West Hampton Woods, and then the Highlands. Shepherd Oaks also could have served as a solid piece as well. We had two residents that had shown interest, one that was ready to go, but we couldn't use the common ground that was abutting. What'll be interesting is when you see the site list and kind of in the final report, when you see the site list where they ended up using is about 33 sites total. The gaps are where those subdivisions are because they make up such a large land mass. We actually have our Public Works Department working to kind of highlight those subdivisions, so then we could put those two images back to back. So the council and the committee could kind of see, oh, that's why there's such a large gap there, because those parcels, I mean, we got interest from the residents themselves, but you have to have access to the abutting common ground for it to work because they're on less than an acre in most cases. We had a couple in the Wild Horse subdivision at the front end where we were able to sneak in, and then Anna's Way, we were able to get one down there. But overall, there's pockets now that are left over. Even though there was a great removal effort, there's still some pockets. So the idea would be, if we're gonna revisit the Northeast Two area, well, the data will show where the focus needs to be, but we're believing it's gonna show that those subdivisions still have the same concentration. The idea would be to share with the HOA those individuals. We already shared a couple, obviously, with them asking us, but we would share the individuals that showed support and say, hey, and send out another mailer directly to those residents. Hey, we're giving you like one last shot here. If a third year gets approved by the council, and really make the agreement with White Buffalo and adding any to, unless there's an area we just need general cleanup, because we got great distribution, very even distribution everywhere except those subdivisions. So
I think that's where you have a really good story. If you put it together and show, here's what you still have, go to those trustees at a meeting, homeowners meeting, and say, look, we just want to share with you. Because I guarantee you, everybody's either hit a deer or has had $300 or $400 worth of landscaping destroyed. And it's like, well, they're so cute.
I
that's,
think,
so
I think
the
the
part-
trustees are just,
Right.
don't want to put themselves on the line. Yeah,
Yep.
so if it was at a neighborhood meeting and people bought into it and they could see that the residents were supportive and they didn't blame them for saying yes.
And the homeowners that are in favor of it, have them be at that meeting.
Well, and the thing is too, the department has noted in a couple instances, this is from on the ground with Arkansas, White Buffalo, that a lot of these subdivisions, they had noted that there was some illegal feeding activity that has occurred. Neighbors would say it, or the individuals showing participation. The department's heard that too. So we think that the individuals that are feeding, they obviously really love the deer, and they probably were the loudest individuals at those HOA meetings that may have been getting in the ears. But unfortunately, right now, the plan would be for the department is to get the follow-up data, get this final report, give a summary, a synopsis to all the residents in those subdivisions and say, hey, unfortunately, your neighborhood missed out on removal because we got told no by the HOA.
Is it just,
Before we send that, we'll get approval from you. the
And every
council
year, it's
committee.
30% more in that population. So
Exactly.
like you say, Garden Valley and West Hampton, not enough common ground in Oak Ridge Trails? I mean, that's between Garden Valley and.
Well, we didn't, Oak Ridge Trails didn't even get back to us. So in that case, we didn't have.
You must not have contacted the right people because I'm a trustee in Oak Ridge Trails.
Well, we sent-
And every time you talked about it, I was like, well, we don't have as much common ground as the other two. And our streets overlap. I'm like, well, they probably just looked and thought,
Yeah, get
you
on
know,
both
that's good
sides.
enough. Yeah, we're gonna get both sides.
Uh-huh.
But I also don't want to be hung by my residents.
it's not a bad thing. It's quick, goes over real quick.
Well, you can stand on my deck and you can probably get 6 or 7.
I ate in my backyard
Yeah.
yesterday. I mean, unfortunately,
But I just want,
Good
like,
round.
going.
Oh, I-
In that case, I honestly think that could, the department believes that could be very beneficial. I think that that south central area is just, that's the one pocket, and then we have this eastern section. It's just those two that are kind of the glaring holes at this time, and the good news is all the individuals that said they did participate this year, they all said, hey, we'd love to do it again. I mean, if the deer population's still a problem. That said, with Oak Ridge,
The deer are all gonna be in those areas. They know they're safe.
well, that's the thing too.
Moving in there.
They are smart, and that actually is an important, adding to kind of the findings here, and I know Mr. Rhodes will go over this as well, but something that we're cracking down on, we have a template that's put together and we're gonna start. It's been very hard to prove if illegal feeding is going on, because a lot of people have been able to say, luckily, when you get a code enforcement officer that knocks on the door and says, hey, we think you're feeding, it usually helps, but now we're sending out letters from, the department, the office of the city administrator saying this is your official first notice. We're doing that a lot more now, even if it's just a report, because that's something they have noted. That when, a lot of neighbors and whatnot have report, hey, my neighbor's doing this, my neighbor's doing that, they're always feeding. That teaches the deer the game, and deer are very smart and they adapt. So if individuals are feeding, if anybody's listening to this meeting, please report it to the city. We'll take care of
It's a
it.
fine,
The fines, it goes to the general penalty, but we give a first,
15, $25, what is it?
no, it's about 250.
Okay.
If they get prosecuted and proved guilty, but that's where it can prove tricky, is that they could say, I put it out for squirrels.
Went across the street, they feed them out of their hand.
That's,
No,
if
we
you
have
had,
eight.
if we had picture, the problem is too, you have to be able to see this activity. So if they have like a salt lick, that's sitting out there clear in sight from the road, from the right of way, then hey, that's pretty easy to identify. But if it's maybe just they throw cornmeal out in their grass, it's tucked in the grass, but the deer can smell it. That happens quite a bit. And if you can't see it from the road, then unless the residents are kind of peeking on each other, you don't even know where the activity might be occurring. So that's a problem. We've gotten some individuals that have luckily reported it to the city, but with how many have been reported, it's almost like how many more are we not actually seeing here, which are teaching the
Well,
deer.
in my situation, we can stop it, we still can't kill a deer because there's no place to shoot them.
Right.
So might as well feed them.
Keep them alive and healthy. That's
It's sad. So how did the netting go? Did anybody ever?
they didn't actually end up having to use drop net this year.
I'd be curious how that worked.
That was included in the permit in case it was needed. Problem was, not even a problem, but it wasn't necessarily, they didn't believe to get to the goal that it was gonna be necessary. They would usually implement the drop netting. It's a really big pain to set it up, first and foremost. A little bit more tough to sell the homeowner that approach versus the sharpshooting approach. It is used with a typical bolt gun. You capture the deer and you call them at that point, but the homeowners typically kind of are against that a little bit more. And in this case, when you do that, you do it more so when you're thinking that you're not going to be able to hit your targets on numbers. And then also if you have just absolutely no coverage in an area, you're just trying to collect as many as you can in that area. Luckily, we had enough sites along the perimeters of these two big pockets we're talking about that it wasn't necessary this year. That being said, we'll be including it in the agreement and in the permit request moving forward as well.
All right, any other questions? Okay, moving on to our master plan update.
All right, thank you, Chair. This is one to give everyone an update. This would have been a for information item, but we found some success with a certain approach at the Economic Development Committee meeting. So I wanted to run it by the committee tonight. Overall, as you may know, that we are going through our master plan update. And one of the two of the components, two of the elements that are included in that plan are community services and transportation. And this being the Administration and Public Works Committee, obviously correlated very well with the purview correlated very well with those two major goals for our cities. That said, the Citizen Oversight Group has had 2 meetings thus far. And the idea not necessarily tonight, but over the next month or so, or maybe 2 months, we have about that much time before they would be touching upon these 2 topics, would be to get some good feedback on the goals objectives and policies from the committee. We would take that, bring it back to the committee as a whole, discuss, feedback from each of the committee members. And then take that, summarize it, provide those responses directly to the master plan group. And they would be able to use that feedback. It would be included in their binders when they're reviewing these items. And hopefully it helps them guide in their decision making. So where the action item comes in, it's a little work on the committee's side. So that's why I wanted to make sure to run it by you, is that at the EDC meeting, there's an economic development component. It's the seventh goal, the seventh element of the master plan. And what we did was we actually shared a SurveyMonkey link with each of the committee members that just literally provided each goal, objective, and policy, worded it, and if there was any changes, modification, hey, this isn't needed anymore, hey, let's add this, whatever it is that to those specific goals or objectives or policies, they could go through and say, yeah, nothing here, but let's change this, change that on each specific one, submit it back, and then the department would bring it back as a summary report with each individual council member's feedback. There would also be a subsection on each goals, sorry, it's a lot, goals. I'm just gonna say goals to cover goals, objectives, and policies. We would also provide a box at the end, which goals, objectives, or policies need to be added to this list. And then there would be a general feedback mechanism at the end. The department wanted to get feedback on this approach. It could be shared with the committee over the next couple days, most likely early next week, and then we'd hope to bring it back with whatever responses the department gets, and a summary report at the April meeting. The department's available for any questions. Thank you.
All right. Any questions? Sounds good. Do you need a motion to move forward?
Motion to publish an internal committee survey as described by the department.
All right. Anybody care to make that motion? Tracy will make it. Cliff will second it. Rob, you good? Okay. Amy? Yes, sir.
Just another quick update there. It's more for information, but we published our master plan quick feedback survey at over the weekend, and we've already received over 400 responses.
Thanks.
300 of those were from Chair Farmer, but
Yeah.
no, but overall.
King Farmer.
No, but in this case, we've already, in just a couple days, 400 responses. It shows that it seems like this is getting a lot of attention, which is great.
Cool. All right, Amy, you good? Okay, all those in favor of getting the survey out, please say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Any abstentions? All right, survey says on the board. Okay, up next, we've got a review of administrator spending limits. Tom, do you want to do this or you want me to do this one?
I just wrote it up.
Okay. So our next couple agenda items are kind of basically just sort of financial planning stuff, and our illustrious treasurer has joined us this evening. He and I have had some conversations about how to kind of update how the city does this stuff and make sure that we're not running into weird clauses and things like that. So to try to smooth things out while also retaining, the control levels that the council likes to have. So in terms of the spending limit, we adjusted it a couple years ago up from $5,000 to $10,000. That's a flat number. And as we have found out, whether it's in regard to building repairs or whatever, that number gets run up pretty quickly. And so the suggestion here is to basically make a couple different spending limits depending on what it is that we are talking about. So rather than just having a firm hard limit in for everything, things kind of move around. And as Tony suggested, which I agree with a lot, we go through and approve the budget every year anyways. And so if these things fall outside of that budgetary amount, we're gonna have this conversation again. So really what we're trying to do is free up our city administrator to effectively manage the budget without us having to be involved in seemingly every decision, which is kind of how I feel a lot of the time. The different spending limits are in the memo. Routine operational expenses are in at 15,000. Capital expenditures would be at 25. Emergency stuff would be at 50. Professional services, 10,000 a contract. Multi-year deals, 10,000 annually, and then just kind of various miscellaneous things would be $10,000. So I just kind of wanted to open up the conversation and see if you guys like the idea of adjusting this from just sort of our flat number to a little bit more of a tiered system based on what we're doing, so that we don't have to have, I mean, we've had, some of you guys remember, we had issues with the elevator and then the heater and like all this stuff that doesn't really probably shouldn't require too much intervention from us on some of this stuff. Obviously, sometimes it can. And then we'll get to the next side of this here shortly. But the idea would be, you know, we get our monthly reports in the meeting in terms of like our expenditure report. This would also include, which we'll talk about in a second, for our treasurer's suggestion, having kind of an overall trimester report, which allows us to keep a better idea of where we're at on the budget. So when it comes to budget time, we're not sort of, digesting all of that at once. We can see where we're going throughout the year. And we can see if we're under somewhere or over somewhere. So when MoDOT comes and asks us for, 600 grand, we kind of know what's up. So I just wanted to open up the conversation, see if anybody had any hard thoughts or feelings or concerns or whatever, and we can go from there.
I think this process is pretty good. Should there be like a second person that is required to sign off on it to the person who is initiating it? There should be a second that should do that.
I think we have to have,
We do.
the second person have to sign the
We
check.
do have internal controls already. Anything over 5,000, our director of planning signs off on as well. So in the check itself, if it's over 5,000, you get those two signatures.
Because these things would come from different parts of the organization, and as long as there's a second involved with that, that would keep things from getting ugly, I guess, or out of line.
Yeah.
Anybody read about Sam's Steakhouse?
Yeah. 1.4 million.
It's a lot of steaks. Tony, did you want to add anything to it?
Not that I reached out and just asked, we haven't looked at these for a while. As I look at it, whether it's a financial review, an ongoing financial review, updating the spending limits, it really gets to improving the efficiency and effectiveness of city operations. Tom and his group are a lot closer to the work, and we always know that those who are closest to the work are probably best situated to make those decisions. I was glad to see how Councilmember Farmer put it together, especially from a category standpoint, to keep things rolling. And then with some enhanced features of reporting, that those types of things would not get out of hand quickly. So I was in favor of the reporting setup and putting some spending limits in to move things along quickly.
Yeah.
Mr. Marshall.
So 27 years or so, we had 2 meetings a month. So we didn't have this kind of problem because you were always in a position then that you had a meeting the second and fourth Mondays. But I guess part of the question would be is how many do we have now that you actually have to hold?
How many,
Just sheer number, how many,
like overages, you mean?
how many checks are you waiting to process because they're over $10,000?
I don't know that it's the checks, it's the more so when we were doing like the drilling into the floor and that's, or whatever it was, and it's 19 grand, like that kind of stuff.
Right.
It just slows the process down.
Well, and I think this ties into and I know we talked about potentially having them be combined, but if the committee's bearing permission with the procurement piece of this, that's where it really slows it down. Is that anything over 10K also kicks in our purchasing policy, which under 10K, the department goes out, gets 3 bids to kind of compare the costs. That said, when you go over 10,000, that's when you have to officially publish the RFP in the newspaper. You also have to give it, in that case, if you're publishing it, you have to give it about 6 weeks to get those responses in, open them publicly, that's really where it slows us down, is also putting together an RFP. And depending on what the project is, I mean, if it's a large construction project, you're gonna have engineering that's gonna help with that RFP process anyways. But when it's something like just for instance, the water boiler, completely malfunctioned this week, and it was about 3,500. It's not, crazy, but at the end of the day, when we had the actual boiler situation.
That just got replaced, so it should be under warranty.
The water heater's a little different. The boiler actually is like the heating mechanism for this huge building. That said, when that went down, that was an emergency expenditure, and this was an ice pop for 4 weeks, but if the department had moved that day to make the order, we would have been, I think it was about 13 days that we would have been without making the actual order itself. So in that case, that was the one emergency purchase that's been done in my tenure. But that does get kind of clogged up in other projects too, where we're trying to make an improvement, make a quick fix, and we do have to do that RFP process.
So even at these new proposed caps, you're still gonna do your bidding and get bids, or you're just gonna pay them?
No, so it's kind of a two-part thing. So one would basically be, we adjust the caps accordingly. Then the next thing, which we can kind of talk about in here, is the procurement thing is going to, those limits haven't been adjusted, it doesn't seem, since like the mid-90s. So we gotta get those set to just kind of basic inflationary numbers. And then this would include kind of a formal review once at some point within a 3-year period of time. So that's somewhat probably dependent on like an election cycle or whatever it is. And then the finance department would basically communicate to us effectively at the end of a year, hey, this is what the inflation adjustment is going to be for next year. And so these procurement limits just kind of move up based on inflation. And then if there's some, crazy thing or somebody really wants to look into it, we can address it whenever. But like at the moment, everything just kind of sits and doesn't do, like literally this stuff hasn't been touched in 30 years, which is not the best. So, I don't know if you guys want to take, the conversation pieces one at a time or put them together. It doesn't make any difference to me. At the end of the day, these things all kind of stick together. There's basically 4 pieces to this. So there's the spending limits for the city administrator. There's the procurement limits that would alter when we need to go out for an RFP. Not to say that we wouldn't if we can't, but in some cases it's just ridiculous. There's adding in a trimester reporting thing. So basically that allows us to see where we're at, instead of doing it quarterly at our treasurer's suggestion, like it just makes more sense to do it then, so we have a much clearer picture. There's also some pieces in here in terms of when we do our mid-year adjustments, that still takes place when it normally would. It's just reported basically in the second trimester, so to speak. And then the last component is just creating sort of a standardized financial review so that we all know what's going on rather than some of the stuff that we have seen it.
You want to try to prove these all together? Is that what you're saying?
To me, they're all kind of interrelated, but I thought, if somebody has a real problem or concern with one, it doesn't necessarily mean that the other stuff doesn't work. So I thought we would break it apart, but if you guys we can go through some more details on it, but if everybody's happy with it, we can do it all together, I guess, or not at all, however you want to do it.
I just have another question. I like the trimesters, but I would really question, do we actually need that September, December? Because we will put a new budget together for final reading in December. So to go back in January and actually review the last trimester, we should have already reviewed all but those last 2. So that the only challenge I'd say with the trimester is that January meeting, we've already completed a budget and voted on and approved it. So is there a better way that maybe you do 2 to 3 months after mid 6 months and use your new cost of living increases, and then don't do that review because you've just done a full budget. So that just before that full budget, whatever you can get the best information, and I would agree, that's why I put your new rate in for the future budget in order to do. I just think that one meeting would be kind of useless.
Okay.
In January, just fine too.
Yeah, and by the way, the idea is not to have like a completely separate meeting. It's just to expand that conversation in our
Yeah,
meetings.
but we would have also, we just put a new budget in.
That's
So,
true.
I mean, that's a lot of.
Mr. Treasurer, what you think?
Yeah, there's no hard and fast, you gotta do it every 4 months. I mean, just, looking at the trimester, again, it's timely reporting of financial activities. It does avoid quarterly commitments, and it aligns with important dates. If those dates are set out there, yes, we could reduce the reporting that's required then, or not even require it, because it's getting taken care of by another full-blown review.
In October, you start pulling all the pieces together, right? So if you had everything up to before October, then now you're gonna have 8 months actual that you'd be using to put your fiscal budget together for the next year. We used to do a July.
Well, the idea is for this July is to start kicking the capital side of it in July and then start introducing it with mid-year, just kind of looking ahead. That's ties in with this too.
That's just 2 cents.
Okay. I'm fine with making those, I mean, I don't know, I mean, I like, maybe what we, instead of calling it a trimester thing, we just make it like a more robust
Financial report.
Review.
review than just a kind of a monthly or normal monthly expenditure thing.
Is there any certain months we spend more than others? Probably not.
Well, the spring and summer
Summer.
months are the most
I
expensive.
mean, those
portions.
would be a good time to have that. That's why I kind of think that October, really getting into the numbers is where you've got the best shot of trying to do a budget for the next year.
Yeah, I mean, my hope with this is to really kind of make our budgetary process a whole lot easier than it is currently, because, like, I'm with you, like, if your summer months are the most expensive or spring or whatever, great, but I would be curious to know, like, how much more expensive was it this year from last year, and what are we planning now moving
Yep.
forward?
I think it's a great idea.
Okay,
In this case, and they do, these dates do kind of correspond with, major dates, and maybe it's been presented more formally and more in-depth review could be done. That May meeting does correspond with when we are wrapping up the audit and we're doing our annual comprehensive financial report.
and it's the first new council meeting, so those
Yeah.
people will get an understanding of where they're at
In
instead
that
of showing
case,
up.
and when you look at it, the annual comprehensive financial report, it can be somewhat of a daunting report. If we could put together the information outlined in here and provide a little bit more context too, I think that could be helpful. Maybe it correlates, and then you have our mid-year budget review that we do usually in September. That's when we kick in another one. And then right then, you're getting right into the normal budgeting season. So maybe it corresponds with year-end, mid-year, and the budgeting
The new
process.
budget, yeah,
The new budget, and attaches to it this more in-depth review.
yeah, I'm fine with that. All right, anybody have any other thoughts or concerns or additions? Do we need, since there are different items, do we need to take them one at a time, or can we do them all together? Or do we just maybe need a motion to do them all together?
We could, yeah, if there's a motion to do them all together, and then the vote on the motion.
Okay.
One thing is that with the change in the spending limits and the change to the purchasing policy practice, that would need to be done in amending our code. The city attorney would have to complete that work.
Yep.
But the other items that can be done. It's
Wouldn't think that would take very long to do.
Procedurally, it can be done.
Yes. For the reporting part, that not a problem doing that just internally and as a policy directive. But for the spending limit, changing that, and then also changing the RFP threshold, you would actually be amending our purchasing policy, which is part of the code. So that would need to go to council as an ordinance.
So then if we did this, for instance,
Let's maybe split them up into,
well, I'm just saying, if we do, how would we do it? If we do those pieces tonight, the council's still gonna have to sign off on the thing as a whole before John will get to work on them anyways, right?
yeah, they could do it at the work session, but it wouldn't be, when it comes, like the first two items, the spending limit, the adjustment on the RFP threshold, those are gonna be an ordinance amending the city code, probably two ordinances, because there's two separate sections. Maybe you could do them both at the same time, but then the financial review process, that can be more of an internal policy.
Yeah, I'm just trying to think for our planning, so if we pass this stuff tonight,
Mhm.
it comes up theoretically on Monday.
Mhm.
That gets then passed to John.
Yeah, it'll get passed to John, our city attorney. to begin work, but I don't think you'll have the actual amendment to these, to the,
Not by Monday.
but not by Monday. So it'd probably be,
It would be nice.
it would be nice. And it could be requested.
There we go. Maybe we put in a request.
It could be requested strong.
Why don't we just try one or two of them? Instead of giving them all to them and see if you could get one done.
Yeah, well, I mean, because I wouldn't, even-
Shouldn't be that big. a deal.
I don't think it would be that big a deal to do both of them.
It's
And
got
let's just, you know, we got a lot of,
3 or 4 days.
Yeah. right? Okay, so then, Tom, for your guys' ease of use, do you want to do these each separately? Just to keep it simple, or do you want to try, I mean, it doesn't really matter.
Let's just, let's do them separately,
Okay.
just to, motion each time could be it.
Okay.
Including the report.
Let's start at the top. Would anybody care to make a motion to press the city administrator spending limit item basically to the Monday meeting? So then we can try to get John to do that stuff. Anybody care to make it? Mr. Albert is gonna make it. Second. Seconded by Ms. Nyant. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Anyone opposed? Any abstentions? Right? Amy, do you want, how many you need me to slow down?
I'm okay.
All right, number two, amending the procurement policy as discussed. Anybody taking that motion?
Which one?
The the RFP stuff, the procurement. So changing when we need to go to, all right, so made by Mr. Marshall, seconded by Mr. Albers. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Any abstentions?
Okay, Tracy, it's yours.
All right, next one, do we need to amend what this is since we're gonna, we're still
Yeah.
gonna do
Yeah, I would say, to adopt the
enhanced
the
reporting?
enhanced reporting that would then correspond with year-end, mid-year, and the budgeting process.
Okay. Tracy's gonna make that motion. Excellent. Cliff will second it. Amy, you good? Okay, all those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Anyone opposed? Any abstentions? And then the last piece, which we didn't get into too much of a conversation on, but it basically is kind of lining all these things up, is it's just creating kind of the automatic adjustment in terms of inflation for kind of everything, basically. And then putting in place that we have to have a review at least once every 3 years of our general financial policy. That makes sense?
When we go through to do this and we come out with our annual number, I only ask that we put in what the master, the charter requires for capital projects.
Yeah.
Dated for the dollar amount every year, because we have a tendency to never think about it.
Yep.
And then we just keep voting for something. Wait, we're gonna get to that.
Yeah, so the idea with this is any of those things, like it just kind of takes that, it's just like, this is just out there now, so that it's those things, it's, you know, the spending limit items, it's all of this just incrementally moves up, and then if we have to make some other weird adjustment.
So if we make these changes and every year we go through our compliance and our financial audits, are there any parts of that that just really will make a lot easier?
When it comes to our auditing process and things like that.
I guess my question is, everybody sits back and, for 5 minutes, we congratulate ourselves, but nobody has a clue unless they've ever done it. How much detailed work goes into that backup?
Oh, it's a lot of work. It's
But any place that this would be helpful in doing that from a process standpoint.
this will be the most helpful during the actual budgeting process for each year. This is kind of more so showing what's under the hood.
Yeah.
On the internal review side, when looking at expenditures, spend to date, when we are proposing what is expected for the next fiscal year. So in that case, I think it would be extremely helpful for explaining.
And sometimes it's just the way you title it, that's all I'm saying,
Yeah.
is the fact that, it's sad that we haven't updated it, but we really haven't had a requirement to have to do that. I mean.
Right.
It's just a simple, we had 45 million to work with.
There you go. Okay, so the other piece basically that's adding in with this fourth one is it's bringing up the idea of just it's locking in the inflation adjustments, it's enhancing the reporting to include a couple other pieces that we don't really get, as Tom said, it's just kind of like getting everybody on the same page in a much easier fashion. Anybody care to make that motion? Bob, I don't know if you're on there, like, you're the last one that could make it. Everybody got one. Did you say yes?
Sure, I'll make the motion.
There we go. By Mr. Jaxi, anybody care to second? All right, second by Mr. Marshall. Amy, you're good on where we're going? Okay, all those in favor of our enhanced reporting, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Rob's not actually opposed, he didn't. Any abstentions? All right, that stuff all works, great. That, unless there's any miscellaneous items, that brings us to the end of our meeting. Which means I'd be happy to take a motion to adjourn, if anybody would care to make that. You got something there, Mr.
I was
Marshall?
gonna ask a question. So the sewer lateral program, I know we just keep pushing that back a little bit.
Yeah.
I've had a couple constituents call and I had told them that I thought at one point there was a standalone program. And she told me that it's actually with the water company. Anybody know about that? The
There was one-
buys like $9.99 a month through the, I think it's through the water company.
It was very American, actually American, it's insurance. You can purchase it on your own.
Right.
And we've recommended that to residents when they call. I have it myself, actually. It's not the perfect solution, but it is an option to protect yourself.
And it's, yeah.
I guess my own question, because people keep asking.
Yeah.
And the poor woman, she's, I've been trying calling everybody and finally kind of backed into that. She said, we're taking it.
Yeah.
Because, you know, they've seen it, you know, what, $13,000. So maybe part of looking at something else, and I know that it was always challenging because of septic systems and all that kind of stuff, which doesn't seem the right way you have to do it. But that's the way it is. But maybe just communicating to people that there is another option out there. It's not cheap.
And just we were talking, quick up, people are listening. There are 3 options currently on American Water's website. They can get just a water line protection, it's $5.49 a month. Sewer line protection, which is the bigger, more expensive issue, $9 a month, and then $12.49 a month for the water line and sewer line protection. So you get both.
Combined.
So it's
So I don't know if that's something that we should put in the newsletter, maybe.
Yeah,
I like it.
Just to say, hey, here's for those who are inquiring minds, or those who just laid out $15,000. Whoever.
Yep.
So I'm ready to adjourn.
Water,
Anything else, Tracy? All right, if we care to make a motion to adjourn. By Mr. Marshall, seconded by Ms. Nyan. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Anyone opposed? Any abstentions? All right, we will see everybody next week for the council meeting and then on Monday in April because of the election.